Ozonics Killerwinds podcast back again. I'm Cole Tanner.
I'm Nick Simon.
We've got special guest.
Third time guest.
Hey, you're breaking records, man. We've never had a guest 3 times.
Yeah. No.
I'm
honored.
We got Jace Elliott. Thanks for being here, man.
My pleasure.
Yeah. We teased this last week a little bit how this is going to be a fun one.
Yeah.
I am excited.
It's always a joy when Jace comes on because he hits us with some facts and some stuff that I think me and you really enjoy.
You know I'm a fact guy.
Yeah.
I love my facts. I actually got to go through this report, and it's like 60-some pages of just nothing but facts. I even put it in my own little black folder.
I know. I came into his office today. I'm like, where'd you get that nice little booklet there? I made it.
Yeah. So I was printing it off, and Susie saw me printing it off, and she looked at me, and she saw things. She goes, "You want a black notebook?" I'm like, "Yes, I do." So I paper punched it and everything.
There you go.
All right. So we are going to talk today about a few different things. I think the hot topic right now that we really want to talk about right off the bat is let's jump into EHD.
Yeah.
So I think before you start, Jace, what I would say part of it is when it comes to EHD, I think is what we all as hunters have experienced in the year. Mm-hmm. And I think kind of a little bit about, I don't want to call it the rumor mill, but what everybody's saying. Mm-hmm. You know, what I feel like Nick and I have been hearing is that there's a lot of EHD around. I actually called the Ventura office. What was that, 2 months ago?
Yeah.
Hey man, what's going on? Can I talk to biologists? What's going on? Because what Nick and I have noticed is that, for example, there's a piece of public ground that we hunt that I've talked to you about before.
Yep.
And we, in years past, like last year we had, 47 different bucks on camera. 47 different bucks between basically September through the rut.
Yep.
47 different bucks from Mondo Pondos to little scrubbies.
Yeah, not to mention, does and fawns. And
a lot of deer.
A lot of deer.
And a lot of good bucks. And that was really, and I had hunted that same piece of public years before that. Mm-hmm. And I had told you before, I'm like, there'll be 40-some bucks on camera out here.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. This year we had cameras out in basically all the same spots. Actually put more cameras out in a couple of different spots. Oh, let's hone in on this. Let's try to hone in on here.
Yeah.
And we had what?
Maybe 10.
10 bucks.
Maybe.
It just weren't there.
Yeah.
There was just, and when we say 10 bucks, there was nothing on camera. Like
just no does.
It would go days without having pictures of
like
deer
you're
on
like
there.
going out there checking the cameras. Is something wrong?
Something wrong
like
with
what
it,
is going on?
Yeah.
It's not like the crop rotation out there makes a big difference.
Yeah.
It's just like what is going on?
Yeah.
I talked to a guy that hunts a piece of private right next to it. Got to know the guy. Hey man, how's it going? Man, I don't know what's going on out here.
Yeah.
It's not seeing anything.
Yeah.
Guy that's retired that hunts pretty near every day of the season.
Yeah.
I'm just not seeing deer. I have bucks that I had on camera last year that were on the hit list and they're just gone.
Yeah.
He has a pretty handle on what's going on around there, knows kind of what deer the guys that shotgun hunt it.
Yeah.
I know a couple bucks got shot, but God, there's still this one and this one. And you talked about that one. Yeah. I don't know. They're not here.
Yeah.
And so talking to the biologist, I'm like, is EHD going on? Like what's going on? And it sounds like there has been more EHD throughout the state. And that's, I feel like what you hear a lot of people on social media, everybody kind of saying.
Yeah.
So that's my pitch to say, Jace, straighten us out.
Yeah. Oh, I'd be happy to as far as, the data I have and what I've been hearing. Before I get too ahead of myself, I just want to clear up a couple misconceptions with EHD. So a lot of times folks will use EHD or blue tongue interchangeably, and that's completely fine. They're basically the same disease as far as they impact deer. Sister viruses, you could really get into the details and see how they're a little different. They're not exactly the same disease, but just so everyone's clear, we're talking about the same stuff.
Okay.
There's a lot of different strains of EHD and blue tongue. We're trying to find out more about sort of what different serotypes are affecting deer across the state as the years go on. Mm-hmm. But we can just treat it all as the same disease for the sake of this conversation.
Okay. Because you talk about in the report about blue tongue and EHD.
Right.
And there's a little difference in the name of it basically, but after that, it's...
So the main difference lies in the host species, so the reservoir species.
Okay.
Whereas blue tongue is more so found in domestics, like cattle primarily, sheep and goats to some degree. And then EHD is much more of a wildlife disease. But in terms of how they affect deer, we basically have to treat them the same.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay.
Makes
Interesting.
sense. Makes sense.
Okay.
So for this year, here we are in 2024, and we're on track to at least be the second most severe outbreak we've had in documented history in Iowa. 2012 was sort of our first severe EHD outbreak. Now, that was primarily southern Iowa. Now, at that time, it was pretty much a southern Iowa disease. Like north of Highway 80, you didn't see very much disease activity. It was really found on that Missouri border. And counties like Cerro Gordo up here, I mean, no chance. There was next to no activity for around a decade.
Right.
And that's changed. That's changed a lot in the last couple years.
So when he turns and looks at you, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Instead, what we find this year is reports coming from 94 of our 99 counties.
90. So the last time I'd heard 87 out of 99.
Wow.
Yep. And we've continued to pick up more reports. It's safe to say that it's affected every corner of the state.
Yeah.
Now, of course, severity depends on the county, and more than that, it depends on the property. But suffice it to say that we've gotten a lot of reports compared to prior years. Now we're talking about 3,000 reports or so statewide, which is a drop in the bucket for realized mortality.
Right.
And we have to understand that. Like, there's really no way to scale it accurately, but there is a study that was conducted decades ago, and it was the only study I'm aware of that tried to basically document carcass detection rates of white-tailed deer. And it was with an EHD lens. And so trained biologists went out and were only able to discover, I think, like 10% of the carcasses that were on the landscape in a systematic study. So therefore, if we multiplied the reported estimates by 10, we'd still be in a very conservative range because our public are not systematically searching our state. A lot of our public doesn't know that we want the reports. That's something that we're trying to improve with these new tools and things like that. And further, there are folks that even if they're aware, they still would choose not to report. So for all those reasons, multiplying it by 10 is still going to be conservative.
Dang.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you're reporting around 3,000 and it could be 10x on that, that's not hard math. It's hard math. It's hard math to swallow, but dang.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about a lot of deer. Now, the way EHD operates is it doesn't come across a county and affect deer equally. It's going to focus on small pockets of deer and have devastating impacts potentially. And that's what we're hearing. Now, there's some counties like in western central Iowa, kind of the Guthrie County, Dallas County, just west of Des Moines. Those counties seem to be widely impacted, whereas it's not just pockets of deer. We're talking about corner to corner hunters are struggling to find deer. The harvest rates are lower than they have been and all of those things. Most of the state, with the exception of a few counties, seem like they're more affected in terms of small pockets, property level, maybe neighborhood level impacts.
Yes.
And that makes it tricky to totally understand and manage for that reason. We can talk to one hunter who went from seeing 30 deer to seeing 3 deer in 1 year, but maybe down the road, his neighbors are totally unaffected. And that's just the nature of the disease.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. And I feel like that's pretty conducive to what we've seen this year.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would agree.
That's really the only spot that we have that has been like that.
So hard.
All the other spots, I mean, they're still getting deer on camera, and when we're hunting, we're seeing a bunch of deer, it seems like, when we're at these spots, but it's just clear that there's something going on.
Yeah, I mean, when we have cameras out, we've got stands out, and it's like, okay, this is one of the spots that we're honing in on, and okay, it's September, here we go, and then they just don't show up, and bucks that were there,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
bucks that were there, and then they just aren't there. I mean, one of the only bucks that we saw again was that double main beam.
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw, and which
number 9.
number 9. This guy knows every single one. That's not Scrape Johnson, right?
No.
Scrape Johnson hasn't been around.
No, Scrape Johnson.
33's gone.
33's gone.
Gosh, 33. Golly.
Yeah.
But it's just weird because all of a sudden it's just like they're not there. I'm calling buddies going, man, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I don't know what I'm doing because we just can't get anything on cameras.
Yeah.
Scrapes that were there just aren't there. Rubs that were there just aren't there. It's just like they just weren't there.
Yeah.
It was the most bizarre thing.
I think that was when my eyes really opened up to the situation, is when we had cameras out first, nothing was showing up. I'm like, well, maybe they're just changing it up a little bit. I'm just going to go walk through it and see if I can find any sign. And it was like hadn't been a deer there in forever.
It just was like they weren't there.
One of the scrapes were on. Cole had cameras on that scrape years ago. And then we went back there last year and the scrape was still there. And now it's nothing. It's like,
Literally it's completely grown over.
Yeah.
Like the deer they'll make a path They just weren't making a path.
Yeah. It's
here one day, gone the next.
But then you go, how far would that be? Would that be 20 miles, 15 miles
probably
east of there on permission pieces? And it doesn't feel like that's been affected at all.
Yeah.
That feels pretty much the same.
Pretty much the same. Maybe just a hair lower,
but nothing like that was like out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely felt like those plots too were a little bit harder this year.
Yeah.
But I felt like the rut kind of laid out a little bit different this year too.
Did.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
So, but it just felt like, it's just really, really interesting. One of the things I really wanted to focus on what that too is how do people report? Can you clarify on that? Because I know when you were here last year, you would talk that you guys were trying to really kind of roll that out and get it so people could report it better. That was part of the reason that I called the biologist, because I'm like, hey man, what do I need to be looking for?
Yep.
Yeah.
And what he told me was, he goes, listen, deer near water, right? One thing about EHD, and you could talk more extensively about this, it's different than CWD, and the fact that the CWD, it incubates in their body for months and months and months.
Years.
Right? Years.
Yeah.
12 to 18 months, right? It can be a long
18
time.
18 to 36.
Okay, sorry.
Wow.
Yeah, there you go. 2 to 3 years. I mean, it's like crazy.
Yeah.
But that EHD, it happens pretty fast. And when it really starts to wear them out, they go to water. A lot like if a deer was wounded, it would go to water. So one thing that the biologist I talked to said, he's like, man, just watch water.
Yep.
He goes, the problem is a guy sees one deer on water and they go, boop, EHD. Well, he's like, okay, double check if it looked like it had been shot, But he goes, but if you start to see multiple, that's a really good indicator.
Yeah. Yes.
You know what I mean? And like you had heard some, you used to work with Midwest Whitetail, and some of the guys at Midwest Whitetail, they do such a great job of telling such unbelievable stories. And unfortunately, the story that they had to tell this year was of EHD.
Yeah.
Who was it that had how many bucks that he found?
Caleb Greiner. I think at one point he checked like 12 different ponds, and like 9 of them had dead deer around it, all on the same kind of, not the same farm, but the same area of southern Iowa.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
So kind of get back to, how do people report? What is the best way to go about that?
Yeah, so we just launched new tools, new to this season, for reporting EHD mortalities. And again, the main things you're looking for are multiple carcasses, although it can certainly kill deer in singularities. It's just unlikely that if there's a severe outbreak, you'd only find one carcass.
Yeah.
And near water is a huge tell. Just the symptoms they experience are internal hemorrhaging, fevers, and like you mentioned, that's going to bring them towards water. They'll never be able to satisfy that feeling they have and eventually die, usually sometimes within water or very close to the shore. Creeks, ponds, that's kind of what you're looking for. Yeah. Stagnant, muddy water is really where we see the most effects. And I know the property you guys are talking about, and there's a lot of stagnant, muddy water there.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
And it's also a seasonal disease, which makes it very different from CWD.
Yeah.
While that's always affecting deer, EHD comes and goes. Usually we start receiving reports in July, although this year it was much later. It seemed like it was going to be a really mild year until August, September, really September.
Yeah. And we started to have weeks and weeks of no measurable rain.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like friends that I know that were like, dude, this isn't looking good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like Northern Iowa had, I think the month of September or August was no measurable rain.
Yeah.
For the whole month. It's like, and you're going out, you're seeing the ground starting to crack and creeks drying up. And you're like,
oh yeah.
Great.
And so, whereas at the beginning of the year, it seemed like we couldn't go a day without rain.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I thought all that water was going to kind of get us out of the weeds with EHD this year, because usually you hear EHD, drought, it's not that simple. There's really 3 conditions that lead to a severe EHD outbreak based on the last research I've seen. That's going to be a hot spring, a wet early summer, and then a dry second half of the summer.
Interesting.
Which we had all 3 of those conditions across the state.
Yeah.
Yep. But back to the reporting. So on our DNR deer hunting webpage, we've basically made these tools redundant. So you can find them on our deer hunting webpage, our deer health webpage, and just our hunting webpage. Now, be aware that we are going through sort of a website migration, but I'm going to do what I can to make sure that the tools are still accessible on the deer hunting website. And I've actually heard from some folks that are actually moving this tool onto the DNR app, which I think would be fantastic.
Get it on the app.
We've been hearing it from a lot of hunters.
I love the app.
Yep.
Do the app.
Yeah.
And it's, if that makes it easier for folks to report in the field,
super accessible,
which it would.
Yes.
I think we'll definitely explore going that way, and hopefully that'll be a tool soon, maybe for next season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's just an online reporting tool. It asks for the information you'd expect. You don't really have to give away any landowner details if you're cagey about that. We just want to know what you found, just so we can have a good idea of how many deer were impacted and where.
Yeah.
There's not going to be any sort of, unwanted field site visits. Like, we don't have officers come out onto your land or our veterinarian or anything like that unless somebody was interested in that. But that is something we hear folks not wanting to report because they don't want, government out on their property. Yeah. That's not at all how this is working. But anyway, there's also a dashboard that accompanies that reporting tool where folks can basically monitor the progression of each outbreak every year.
Okay.
So see where the reports were, received throughout the state and how it changes over time.
Interesting. Yeah, man, I'll tell you what, like I said, we've talked about this before, but I think sometimes I know I lose sight of the fact that, Mother Nature is it can be a brutal thing.
Yeah.
Right? And we become a part of that when we go out there and we go hunting, right? We become a predator and they're the prey. And it's, you think about if you make a marginal shot and you think, gosh, man, that's a tough way to die. You know what I mean? And the reality is all those critters out there, that's how it ends. You see coyotes walk by trail cameras and stuff. You're like, oh, there's a coyote. But those coyotes are out there and they're looking for the weak.
Yeah.
And they nip and they nip and they nip. And then they finally take them down. That big buck for 1 or 2 or 4 or 5 or 8 or 10 years, he's out there walking around and eventually he gets taken down.
Yeah.
And they die somehow, right?
Right.
Unfortunately, EHD is a part of that cycle too. You know what I mean? It's funny because I've, somehow this type of stuff came across Jet, my little boy Jet. He's 8. And he said to me a while back about, oh yeah, did you hear about deer have diseases and they're dying? And he was like really upset about it. And I'm like, man, bro, that's just a part of it.
Yeah.
We're a predator out there and we're trying to harvest and kill the deer. And there's other things out there that are doing the same thing. It's unfortunately part of it. It sounds like a terrible way to go.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Usually, so we have a lot of reason to believe that the deer in Iowa are very naive to EHD and blue tongue, meaning that they don't have immunity or resistance built just because the disease is new to the state. I mean, there's states, in the southern U.S., eastern U.S. that have been dealing with EHD outbreaks to some degree since the 50s.
Yeah.
We just had our first severe outbreak 12 years ago. So in other words, our deer are much more susceptible to die, it seems like, than elsewhere in the state. And it usually is going to be a few days after infection, they'll probably be dead. Or they'll survive, and there are deer that survive it. I mean, I got a lot of calls this year from guys who harvested a deer that was walking a little funny. It had, those sloughed off hooves. Maybe it was walking on its knees and had a kind of a chafed brisket, which is...
Really?
Yeah, so for chronic EHD infections, the hooves actually will slough off, and it's so painful to walk on them that you will see deer walking on their knees, and it's obvious when you see it, but even if a deer is in the recovery stages, he'll have, potentially swollen knees, he'll have, basically rubbed up chest. Dude, so it's nasty.
I did not know about that.
I had no idea.
Yep. But you have to look at it as a good thing because the more deer that can survive the disease, they can pass on that resistance.
Yep, pass on the immunity.
And that's how we're going to get out of this in decades to come, I think, is by having these outbreaks now. The more severe the outbreaks, theoretically, the quicker we'll get there.
Yeah.
But, man, it is devastating for a lot of folks around the state.
Yeah.
I don't want to be alarmist and make it seem like our deer population is in jeopardy. It's a severe outbreak. There's properties that are devastated. By and large, we're seeing the harvest and the reports that show that we still have a healthy herd in most of the state.
Yeah.
But central Iowa, northwest Iowa did get hit pretty hard. And seems like every county got a little bit of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the thing to talk about there next is how do we get out of it? I feel like we've all been on social media and we've seen a lot of people kind of talking, right? And I think one thing we've heard a guy say is, well, guys need to, stop shooting does. Stop shooting does. Stop shooting does. I feel like my stance on it is the state of Iowa has the best interest in mind. You know a lot more about this than I do. I'm going to lean on the experts.
Yeah.
And if they have the doe tags out there and they're willing to give us the doe tags, you've talked about before that taking away the doe tags necessarily isn't always the right thing.
Right.
And I feel like if the state felt like it was bad enough, I don't know, maybe there isn't a way, but you think the state could say, put out a press release, all tags in this county are voided. You know what I mean? If they wanted to stop, because it's not like you guys are stopping saying, hey, guys, don't go hunting. You're not unissuing the tags. I mean, how do we get out of it? Is that the right thing to do, to stop shooting deer? So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I'll definitely address that. It's difficult because it's so situation dependent, right? And Iowa is not one deer population. We're talking about a lot of different regions that have different things going on.
Yeah.
Now, if you're in the core deer country of southern Iowa, northeast Iowa, and you're used to really strong numbers and you get whacked with an EHD outbreak, you're going to notice it more than anybody else. But you also have probably the quickest turnaround time before you see that population recover. There's a lot of habitat, and when you have a strong deer population going into the outbreak, it shows, 2 to 3 years, and we'll see a recovery at a countywide scale. Not every property necessarily, but at the scale of data we collect, that seems to be the case. Yeah. Now there's counties out west, western Iowa, all along the river counties. They've had some bad EHD outbreaks over the last 10 years, and they do not seem to be recovering. Now, there's other things keeping that population down that we're working on addressing, but the disease is not helping, and we're not seeing the same recovery. So it's a nuanced answer, right? What I would tell every property owner is shoot what you're comfortable with. If you're out there and you're not seeing a lot of deer, there's no obligation to fill your tags.
Right.
If you're concerned and you want to speed up the recovery, don't shoot does. And theoretically, that'll happen quicker. But there's a lot going on. I mean, if your neighbor's complaining about an EHD outbreak, but you're still seeing the same number of deer, again, it's going to be up to the hunter. And the state can do a lot, right? Like we do manage on an annual basis, but it's difficult when you have an outbreak that occurs in the middle of bow season, like we did this year.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of reports coming in October. That's too late to respond to.
Right.
And the tags are what they are at that point. The process we use, we get NRC approval of our quotas in the summer, and they're set. So, if we had the foresight to know that some of these counties would be hit like they were, I'm sure we would have put less tags out there.
Yeah,
but at the same time, people aren't going to buy tags if there's no deer.
Yeah.
Hunters do tend to self-regulate very well, and they need to because, as an agency, we can't manage on a property level. That has to come down to the landowner. There's a lot of situations where maybe you had a doe management program in the past. Maybe this year is a year to take a break.
Yeah.
But maybe not. And, the answers lie within what information you can gather from your property.
Yeah. Well, I think you couldn't hit that on, that's hitting the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because it does seem so nuanced. And with that EHD affecting one place and not affecting the next, not only within the managed areas of Iowa, the counties that fall within those areas, but then just certain fragments within each county.
Totally.
It's just wild how it could differ so much.
Yeah.
Because we saw it here. I mean, North Iowa, we saw it in one spot and then completely not really at all in the other.
Oh, yeah.
So that's really interesting. Yeah. So like you said, that's good to hear.
Yeah,
definitely. And I think there's a lot of guys that are doing that. They're just not shooting the does.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's probably why we see the recoveries as quick as we do.
Right.
I mean, nobody wants to go out and lay down 10 does if you believe you might have less than that on your property, right? And obviously that's not going to bode well for the next year.
Right.
But at the same time, just hearing about EHD and not seeing it on your property, you don't have to act any differently. Again, it's, we encourage our hunters to sort of take their management on their property into their own hands. I do think that a lot of hunters agree that, we set the quotas for a reason. There's cases where we don't necessarily respond to a severe outbreak, or at least haven't in the past, and we have seen a fast recovery. I'm not exactly sure what our future holds, but I think we're learning more about the disease as the years come.
Yeah.
I think we're learning what works and where it works, and I think that we're adapting in that way.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
It is.
Well, I feel like this is what we're talking about right now is a great segue into talking about this new report. New as of the legislature got it in October, right?
October 1st.
Okay, October. So I think looking at this report and the reporting that you guys and the surveys that you guys will be doing this coming spring will be a huge indicator, and we'll see a lot of probably antlerless tag quotas reflected into next year.
I would say so.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. And so the report you mentioned, I'll provide a little background for that.
Yeah.
In the 2022 legislative session, there was a bill passed and signed, I believe it was Senate File 581. And there was a number of things that was contained in that bill, but one of which was to conduct basically a never-before-done white-tailed deer study in Iowa, that the DNR was basically an advisory role that we contracted Iowa State University to do a lot of the heavy lifting. But there was really two major deliverables that I think are worth discussing: the population study and the economic study.
Yeah.
And so basically, our department was mandated to estimate county populations, which, again, we had always used trends. Like spring spotlight survey, bow hunter observation survey, antlered harvest, deer vehicle collisions. Those are the four main ones. And we can track how populations change throughout time in a county. Mm-hmm. But we could never tell you how many deer there were necessarily, which is something that's new with this study.
That's what I was the most excited about.
Absolutely.
Because I remember the deer survey or the deer study that was done years and years ago. Gosh, it was when I was in college. It was in 2009, 2010, there was a study that was done when the deer population was really, really high. There was a study that they had brought a big committee together and they did something kind of like this.
So it wasn't necessarily population estimates or anything of that nature, but it was when our deer study advisory committee came out with basically our deer management plan.
That's what sorry. That's what it was.
Yep.
And it brought together kind of the insurance companies and the special interest
stakeholder groups.
Yep. That was
exactly.
Hey, this is what it's going to be moving forward.
Yep.
So we can all figure out what the right route is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And funny you mentioned that group because we just met last week. Okay. So it's still an ongoing engagement of stakeholders every year. Yeah. Actually, we primarily discussed this topic this last week. And so the group's still alive and well, and certain groups have come in and out of the mix, of course, but I think that's a really important part of our process.
Right. So this was the first real survey that gave a real clear estimation on deer populations per county for the whole state of Iowa.
That's right. And we're talking about densities, deer per square mile. And the reason that metric was chosen by ISU is because that's, of course, the most useful metric for deer management. Mm-hmm. Just putting a raw number is not necessarily insightful, and that's not really the best way to achieve management goals. Mm-hmm. But what the authors of the study done, which I really can't emphasize how much work ISU put into this, now we have a per square mile density where we've standardized the deer population more or less across every county in the state. So I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, no, it's really, really something to read. Like I said, it's like 60 some pages long. It's some of it feels like you're reading a thesis paper.
Totally.
A master's degree thesis paper.
Right.
And the other parts of it I felt like, were really easy to walk through. Mm-hmm. One of the things that really jumped out at me right off the bat was I thought you guys did a very good job of really, if you go right at the beginning, there's a summary that really kind of like lays out what the whole rest of it's all about. Yeah. But I thought it was really interesting how you really laid out the research and talked about, which you just kind of, zipped right through that a minute ago, but was about how you guys do spotlight surveys.
Yep.
You do bow hunter surveys during the bow season. You also do antlered buck harvest, and then you also do deer collision. But the deer collision, the bow survey, and the antler deer, you're comparing those to historical data, right? You're really comparing it. You're using that to compare year over year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
But you're using that. You guys are using the spotlight to really try to look at the population.
Yeah, well, and that's a change now with this work. Before, all of the different indices were essentially treated the same. There's a lot of strengths to the Spring Spotlight Survey, and that's why it lended itself well to a population estimate protocol, because it's standardized effort. Every county gets about 50 miles of rural roads driven by staff every year with the same environmental conditions, more or less, and things like that. So we have more control over the quality of the data and its longevity and its future. We rely on our bow hunters for that observation survey, but it's not something that we can hang our hat on as the ultimate,
Right.
That being said, there's weaknesses to the Spring Spotlight Survey.
Right.
Absolutely. At very best, we're only looking at about... We did.
Yeah.
Yep. And every data set has its limitations
you're
and its
only
strengths.
You're only looking at it off the road.
Right.
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 And you talked about the I'm going to murder it, but there was something about the shed.
View shed.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, so when I read it initially, I was like, well, if they're doing, because I don't know, it was just a misunderstanding on my part. I thought for sure that you guys were doing some sort of aerial thermal counts or something like that. But it sounds like the deer counts are based off those spotlights in the spring, which makes sense in the way that in the spring, there's less foliage. Mm-hmm. You know, there's probably less feed. So you're hoping that deer are probably going to come out into more open spaces.
Exactly.
So, and if you are spotlighting at night, you're going to be able to see farther because there's less foliage.
Yes.
And so, like you talked about, they try to do it roughly about the same variable weather conditions, and then roughly about the same time. But then there's basically formulas that you guys are using to figure out, okay, well, you're spotlighting. Well, it's only, initially I'm like, well, they're only just spotlighting off the road. But then you look at, okay, well, if there's this many deer in these open spaces, we can extrapolate what that would be for so far after that.
Yeah.
But that gets harder in southern Iowa, and it gets harder in wooded areas.
Absolutely.
You know, so it's just not the end-all cure-all.
That's right. No, and it's a long-standing survey that we've done. So again, we were able to kind of fit it to the demand, the mandate, which was to estimate county population. But yeah, I mean, there's error with anything.
Right.
And so when you see those estimates, you know, they might say that there's 17 deer per square mile in Boone County. There's going to be a range, which is just as likely. You know, perhaps it's 15 to 20 deer per square mile, and each of those densities is just as likely as the next. Yep. And the midpoint is chosen for, you know, simplicity.
Right.
But that's important to understand too, is that each of these estimates have a range that might not necessarily be shown in the maps, but we're getting a better understanding of how density compares across the state. But, you know, a deer census is just never possible, or something that would even really be useful.
You're talking about an elusive animal.
Exactly.
That doesn't want to be seen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we can't even accurately count the number of humans in the state.
Let alone a deer.
Exactly.
A deer that doesn't want you to know he's there, and generally only for 10 and a half months of the year only walks around at night.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so, you know, real quick, the basic methods used to get from spotlight counts to density is, you know, counting the deer, but we're also taking their distance from the road.
Right.
And that lends itself to a distance sampling approach where we can say, you know, over 400 meters, which is more or less how far you can see with a spotlight if you're really lucky. Where are the deer situated on the landscape? And then how much of that landscape can you actually observe from the road? And we can see that using like spatial imagery data with you know, GIS components. Mm-hmm. It's frankly a bit above my head. I wouldn't have been able to do this myself.
Right.
So it's great we had our partners at ISU. But anyway, they can turn that into a representative density. Where habitat exists, that's the densities you'd find on average per county.
Yeah, the spot that I was like, the spot that, again, I go back to like the places that I've hunted. And I think about like Clayton County. You look at White Pine Hollow. That would be a hard place to measure densities.
Oh, yeah.
You're talking 1,000 acres inside a couple gravel roads. And if you're going 400 meters off the road, it's like, man, I hope you guys are trusting those formulas because there's a lot of country there.
Yeah.
When I read the report, what I envisioned it as, it's like if you've got all this contour, it's almost like the way that they're figuring it almost like lays it flat to say this is how much area there actually could be.
So it says this is how much area you could actually see. And if you counted 20 deer and you could only see 50% of the area, then we can assume there's 40 deer there.
Right.
So that's more or less how it works.
Yeah.
But keep in mind,
that's why I had a highlighter. I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on here. I'll have to come back to this. It's confusing.
Yeah, it is. And it's more complicated than I just made it seem, of course, in a way that I couldn't explain. But what's important to note is that we're still only looking at 5% of each county. If we can see 400 yards on each side of the road the whole time we're driving, which is never the case, we'd only see 5% of the county. Mm-hmm. But we know that it's a representative 5%. These routes were laid across the county in a way that sort of represents the county, right? So we have a north and a south transect in every case, and we're trying to run through the habitat that exists, but we're not running along a river as if that's the only habitat in the county. Mm-hmm. So
yeah,
interesting.
Yep,
that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. Yeah, like you said, again, I could get into the weeds on a lot of this, but just again going off of some of the parts about the summary talks about that. 87 of the 99 counties showing a stable population trend, 12% increased. that was just really, really interesting to see where we're at.
Yeah.
It's like our numbers aren't growing, and they're not falling, right? Which is, I feel like it's good.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
definitely.
I'd rather it be like this rather than this big, huge bell curve.
Yeah. And,
You know what I mean?
Right. And so that was a good point to bring up, that 87 of our counties were determined to be in a stable or declining state, whereas 12 are increasing since the 1995 level. Granted, we don't have the best data going back to 95 like we would if we were just comparing to 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But using the data we have, that is the case. So, that mid-90s is more or less our management objective that we were given from the Deer Study Advisory Committee. So that shows us that by and large, we've got the right amount of deer in the state.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's interesting because like we talked about before, in the 90s, it felt like, again, with the numbers are where they really wanted them, and then they went way, way up, and now they've kind of come back to where we want them to be again, which is pretty interesting. Even through that EHD outbreak in 2012, where we've come back to now, it would be really, really interesting to see this time next year.
Yeah, absolutely.
It would be really, really interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How often is something like this, do you think, going to be done? Is this something that is going to be repeatable, or what's the plan?
Absolutely. So by design, it'll be repeatable. And I know for my program, at least, we'll be looking at county densities every year as part of our annual regulation process. I mean, it improves a layer of data that we already used. So we'll continue to do that. It just makes that survey a lot more powerful. In terms of a report like this, I believe that the bill requested every 3 years.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yep. So that would be a revisitation of the economics, and the population stuff will already be done on an annual basis.
Yeah. When you talk about some of the economics, a lot of it was extrapolated out, right?
Yes.
Into 2023 from some of the stuff that had been a few years ago.
Yep.
But yeah, to go into a little bit about the densities, if you and we'll put a link to this study. It's pretty cool. They actually have some pretty killer maps that actually show what the densities are for the entire state of Iowa, and then also not only based on the density but the habitat,
right?
Which is really interesting. Which again, that's
awesome.
It's kind of funny because it's not rocket science, right? Like where there's better deer habitat, there's better deer numbers, and where there's less deer habitat, there's less deer numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, just right off the bat, you look at some of the southern Iowa counties, Appanoose County, 40 deer per square mile, Jefferson, 29 deer per square mile, Clayton County, Northeast, 34 deer per square mile, Alameda, 36. But then you look at no man's land that we're in, Cerro Gordo County, 11 deer per square mile.
Yeah.
You get over to Ida County, 2 deer per square mile.
Crazy.
Golly.
Yep.
I mean,
Exactly.
if you were hunting the magic part of the rut, you're only going out there, there's 2 deer per square mile. Wow. I mean, if you did a doe bleat, if there's that one buck, he's like, I'm on my way. You know what I mean? Because there's just no deer there. Yeah. Or maybe there's no bucks there either. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see, again, you can see how the density is, it's just to the south and to the northeast. And then obviously the habitat is where it is too.
Exactly.
All correlates.
We just, again, North Central Iowa gets so much more fragmented. It's not that there's not here, but that was also the interesting thing too, is you look at the management units.
Yes.
And then you can really see the river systems of Iowa.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is where the habitat is up here.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
You get on the Iowa River, you get on the Winnebago River, you hit the Cedar River, and that's where the habitat is.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And so that's a good point. I mean, where we have a lot of deer, we have a lot of habitat. Like you said, it's not rocket science, but I think it's a good thing for maybe folks that aren't really into deer hunting to understand.
Yes.
Is that our deer population is not divided equally across the state, and neither is our habitat.
Well, and it's interesting too, though. Like, I feel like one thing, I wish that one of these days that you were up here, we could just take you on a drive, because I would love to show you. I feel like there's a lot more out, and this is kind of off subject, on subject. Well, by the couple of these permission pieces, there's some guys that are just creating habitat. You can make deer habitat. It talks about here in the survey about the study about the habitat. You can let tall grass prairie grow.
Yep.
You can plant cedar trees.
Yeah.
You can plant oak trees. And if you give it 10, 15, 20 years, all of a sudden you can make a middle of nowhere field and cut a tile. And guess what? And you have cattails and you got water. And there you go. You can create deer habitat. There's guys around out there that are creating deer habitat that was just not there. It was just a field. The guy went, you know what? I want to have this for my my grandkids or my kids.
Yeah.
And 30 years from now, guess what? Now look at it. It's deer habitat that you just wouldn't have ever thought.
Even a couple of the public spots that I went to this year, you could see strips of little baby oaks and stuff. And I drove by and I'm like, oh, that's pretty dang cool right there.
Yeah. Well, eventually.
See where that's going to be in a couple of years. Yep. It's awesome.
Eventually. Yeah. No, it's really interesting. Like I said, my wife and I, so I live in Clear Lake. We're moving over to Britt. So just west of here, just a bit. And when you get out by Britt and towards Algona, it's kind of pretty desolate.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
Very
it is.
flat.
I mean, it's just very flat, and it's just everywhere you look is cornfields. But when you kind of look out and then you come on a bridge, you'll see a dredge ditch, and then you'll see buffer strips, and you see tall grass prairie, and you see in those dredge ditches, and that's where those deer live.
Exactly.
I mean, out at the farm, there's the kids call it the river, but you walk down to the river any time of year, and guess what you see down by the water?
Bunch of deer tracks.
You see a bunch of deer tracks, and they're there.
Yeah.
They're there.
Yeah.
They just, it's just less habitat.
Yep.
So it's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And then I think the thing that was really awesome is to read about the economic impact. Man, that was interesting. Well, before we get into that, no, it was along the same lines as the economic impact, but it talked a lot about, I thought it was really interesting how you guys went into the economic impact, not only, and like basically you called it like the venison value.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. And it's funny, as I read it, I'm like, well, what about taxidermy? You know what I mean? Like, what about other things? You guys go through how many taxidermists are roughly how many taxidermists state of Iowa. I thought it was really interesting. You even came up with how much meat would be per deer. So they're estimating fawns 20 pounds, adult does 40 pounds, adult bucks 60 pounds, which that's pretty fair.
Yeah.
When guys tell you they're getting, oh man, I got 150 pounds off that deer. There's no way. I've cut up enough deer to know. If you cut them up and you debone them, I mean, you know me, I go to Walmart and get my white containers. You can put a whole deer in like a container or two. It doesn't take a whole lot.
Right.
You know what I mean? But the inferred value of venison deer harvested in Iowa, roughly $24.6 million per year.
Wow.
Yep. And again, so that was really, really interesting. And that's just the value of the venison. Right. When you start looking at the meat processors, you think about Elma Meat Locker. That's one that's kind of near and dear to our heart. Deerfield is right up in that same country. It talks about that 52% of deer hunters take their deer meat to a commercial operation. 52%. I fall into that category. But they even broke it down into how much is deboned and how much is whole. 28.5% boned out, 25% whole deer. They even had the average cost of what it costs, which is, I pretty much agree with that. That's roughly what it is.
And it's a minimal value. I mean, there's people who spend a lot more than that.
A lot more. Yep, absolutely. And then for that commercial venison processing, roughly about $6.2 million per year generated from the venison processing.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Which that's the crazy thing is if you put on a map all the venison processors, there are a lot less around than there used to be.
Yep.
Definitely.
I remember 10, 15 years ago, you could hush in pretty much just about anywhere. There's a lot less of them around. So, 6.2 million over a lot less processor makes some money. They are.
Yep.
I mean, look how far we have to try to go to. Far we have to drive to go to one.
Yep.
Which is more power to them. It's awesome that they're there. I'm kind of going over this. Jump in anytime, Jace. Talked about the average cost of a shoulder mount in the state of Iowa. They even had that broken down.
What's that at?
Guess.
$650.
Pretty close. $530 to $685 per shoulder. This Iowa Taxidermy Association said there's 48 businesses, but they found another, this Manta online business directory found about 140 taxidermists in the state of Iowa. Average of $48.6 million experienced in Iowa annually.
Crazy.
When you start to really, and what you'll find out about the economic part of this, because I can go on about this part for days, is that white-tailed deer are the highest valued wildlife in Iowa.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt.
Definitely.
We literally have a hunting consumer show called the Iowa Deer Classic.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't have like a goldfinch expo. Maybe they do. Sorry if you're a goldfincher. I love goldfinch too. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's insane.
Yeah.
And conservatively, at the summary, it said, and it says it, the conservative number is not as much as the big number. There's a big number in here. That was like over $500 million. You know how much $500 million is? Do the math on that.
It's a lot.
That's Patrick Mahomes' contract. Oh, coming from a Vikings fan. But yeah, you can probably tell me what it is before I can find it. What was the...
Yeah, so
here it is.
Total net benefits?
Yeah, the cost... Oh, that was the deer collisions. Oh, here we go. The minimum tangible value of deer in Iowa. This is minimum. This is the under promise, not the to over deliver. $181 million a year. Jeez. But there were other numbers that were way higher than that.
Yeah, well,
the where it was extrapolated out for 2023.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll find it, but go on.
Well, yeah, and it's important to note too that that's the minimal tangible benefits. So that's everything where dollars are actually traded. And the reason that I myself would never, do a cost benefit analysis on a wildlife species, of course, unless requested, is that it's, unfair to do so because there's intangible benefits and intangible costs associated, right? So you can do the math at the end of the study, and to save anybody the work, there is a net tangible economic benefit of about $40 million per year in the state.
Right, the economic impact.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's in the green considerably, which isn't a surprise to anybody, I don't think. But that's not getting at the cultural importance that we have for whitetail deer, for hunters and non-hunters. And just, the ripple effects that whitetail deer have on the economy that just can't be captured.
Yes.
Exactly.
I mean, think of how recreational land values have changed over the last 20 years because of whitetail deer.
Gosh.
As somebody that's...
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
It really is.
Well, dude, so let me just blow your mind here. This is what he's talking about, and I have it highlighted. Appendix B, page 45. An economic impact analysis estimates that deer hunting alone generates over $400 million annually in direct, indirect, and induced, quote unquote, wages and income, economic effects, and an additional $60 million in federal, state, and local taxes. This has been inflated to reflect from the original study that was done before. Then they extrapolated it out. It says an additional about 837,000 people also spent about $711 million in 2011 to observe wildlife within the state of Iowa. This is based off of this USFWS data, and then they extrapolate from there for the state of Iowa.
Yep.
So he says so the data note that 287,000 people identified big game as their primary wildlife experience relative to wildlife watching activities around their home within a mile of their residence. So because the thing that came to mind for me is you think about every non-resident. They come here, they buy their doe tag. The state of Iowa says you got to buy a doe tag. Then they get their buck tag, right? And then they're getting a hotel. They're paying for gas at Casey's. They're probably getting a piece of breakfast pizza, because if you don't come down and get a piece of Casey's breakfast pizza, you're just not in Iowa, right? Then you're going to probably stop at Quick Star. You're going to get something else. You're going to get a cola. Then you're going to go eat at the local diner to get lunch, and all of that just you're staying at a little dive hotel in a little small town. It all keeps just going and going and going and going.
McDonald's.
There's 6,000 non-residents that are doing that every single year.
Yeah, exactly.
You and I can look at right now.
Yeah.
Zip and Ben.
Yeah.
He's got his uncle and his cousin. They have non-resident late mustags.
Yeah.
They're going to be coming down, and they're going to be coming down for pretty near like 2 weeks.
Pretty close.
Yeah. And they're going to be staying at his place, and they're going to be going to OP, and you're going to be eating it. You're going to be stopping at Quick Star. And
7-star every single morning for breakfast.
Yep, 7-star every morning. That'll be that's good cheap food.
Yeah.
But still, Quick Star, and they'll be mad because you call it Quick Trip in Wisconsin. And then I'll be hunting with you, and then we'll be driving down to where we're going to be going. That's a 45-minute drive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and then putting gas in the truck and stopping and doing it, it all just keeps cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. It all keeps adding up.
Yep.
It was really interesting to see that, to see those values of what that is. It's just wild.
And we always knew they would be huge, right?
God,
Anybody that's familiar with the scale of deer hunting in Iowa can understand that. But it's really interesting to break it down by the hunter. Did you happen to see that? Like what the average deer hunter in Iowa spends a year?
Yes. I got that too. Yeah, dude. Let me get to that here.
There's probably some guys who shouldn't show that to their wives. But
my goodness. I know. Well, while I'm finding that, the one thing that I was really surprised by is crop damage. Mm-hmm. I thought that was going to be a lot higher. I feel like what that said to me is there's a lot more crop than there is deer in Iowa. There's a lot of crop out there. There's a lot of crop.
Well,
$5.2 million is still a lot of crop damage, but when you look at the percentage, it was like 0.5%, or it was even less than that.
Less than that.
Yeah, it wasn't even a very big number. I was really surprised. Yeah, it said that level of damage relative to 2020 harvested corn acres, acreage yields, and prices would be valued at $5.2 million. That's how much it was, but the percentage was just such a small number.
It's less than 0.25%.
Yeah, 0.25%. It wasn't as much as I thought, because you feel like, oh man, deer are just doing a number. Maybe they are in certain places.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's why we have depredation programs.
That is why we have it.
Yep. But on an average, not really.
Yeah.
Well, and if you look at where we see a lot of deer in Iowa, that's not always where we see a lot of corn.
Yeah, exactly.
Where the most corn's grown, we have the lowest densities.
Exactly.
So I'm not necessarily shocked by that figure. But in all fairness, that's just damage to corn grain.
Yes.
Just because that's the only study that's been done on it, and we didn't have the time or budget or resources to do our own yet, which is something we're exploring, and I can speak on that later. But that 5.2 million is just that's just refers to corn, and it just refers to grain loss.
Because there's a part in there about other types of nuts and different things like that.
Or vegetational browsing of corn is not included in that.
Okay.
Just because there hasn't been any baseline data laid down in order to estimate that. So in all fairness, the 5 million is an underrepresentation of total damages to all agricultural systems, or at least corn and beans.
Yeah.
But we did also estimate specialty crops, nuts, trees, fruits, vegetables, things like
Christmas
that.
trees.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. But the methods used for that were basically self-reported damages from, I believe, 48 farmers in the state. So not a huge sample size, but it still equated to, I think, less than 4 million per year.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yep.
Okay. So I have the numbers about, and again, these are adjusted from and let's clarify on that because I talked about this earlier. These numbers are adjusted from the 2011 USFWS data. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it says here, so adjusted from the data, it was estimated that 176,000 people 16 and over participated, resident, non-resident, in deer hunting. About 88% of all big game hunting participants were accounted for in the survey in Iowa. Big game also including wild turkey. These people collectively hunted deer for almost 2.6 million days in Iowa.
It's funny to put it that way.
Oh, dude, it's like when you do this, some of this is blowing this is blowing my mind, yeah. And spent an estimated $136.2 million. That was in 2011. Adjusted was 189.3 for the adjusted. So it was 136 in 2011, but adjusted to 2023 was 189, or about $575 per hunter per year. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, but see, this is where this gets a little confusing. I want to say this right.
Yep.
It was 136.2 in 2011. Now it's 189. It was 575 in 2011. Now it's $796 per year. Assuming these rates hold today, there would be about 166,000 deer hunters in Iowa in 2023. That came from Jace. It even says Elliott, 2024, who collectively spent an estimated $132.1 million to experience hunting in the state. Yeah. So hunting is bringing in some cash, baby.
Yeah.
You have an important job. In summary, talks about here, it says that using only data that is specifically about deer related, the lower bound value of tangible benefit that deer contribute each year in the state of Iowa is $180.7 million. Additionally, the contributions of deer to other tangible values such as their role in wildlife viewing experiences. This could be upwards of hundreds of millions per year.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal. I mean, it's funny. It's really interesting to see this on paper because I feel like this is something that I've been saying for a really long time. Oh, yeah. And then you read this and you're like, I was just saying it as a redneck, and now you're saying it academically, and the state legislature is looking at this going, okay, I feel like that's the big part of this too, that every representative got this report and said, hey, take a look at this.
Yep. Yeah.
And now it's on all of their minds too. You might not be a deer hunter, but now, I hate to say it, but like when there's a value put to something, people start to take notice.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. And I feel like this puts this in people, kind of draws their attention to it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Not a doubt.
Yeah. I mean, I think if somebody wasn't a deer hunter, they would not guess close to 200 million per year in economic
Definitely
benefits.
not.
Right.
Dude, wild. But
That's
then
awesome.
The other part about this that there's a lot about, and this part gets a little head bob, fall asleep, but is about the deer collision stuff.
Yeah. Yep. That's a big number too.
But not only deer collisions with aircrafts. Which wasn't a very big number, but I was like, heck yeah, they put that in there. Dude, deer collisions with aircrafts. They kept track of that. I have the number of how many there were per year. It wasn't as many as you would have thought, but still. But that was really interesting too when you start to talk about, and that goes back to you. I don't want to say it wrong, but the interest group or the people that are on that board. Part of it is insurance. Mm-hmm. State Farm Bureau, State Farm Bureau, or Bureau of State Farm. What is it? State Farm. It was mentioned.
Yeah,
here
so
a couple times.
Iowa Farm Bureau is involved in our
Farm
deer study advisory committee. The advisory committee for this particular deer study did include representatives from the Iowa Insurance Division.
Got it.
So they're state employees that kind of oversee insurance in Iowa, and they had a big role, and especially the vehicle collision part.
Right.
Yep.
So, getting into that, you have a 1 in 63 chance of experiencing a deer versus car collision in Iowa. 1 in 63 chance. Interesting. That ranks 6th annually in the likelihood. 6th annually in all 50. But the thing to keep in mind is deer versus car collisions represents only 14% of total car accidents.
Right.
14%.
And that's 14% where an animal's involved, and there could be other factors that led to the accident.
Right.
But that's really not in the scope of this study, so it just gets lumped in.
Right. Gotcha.
Yep.
The cost annually of these deer versus car collisions in Iowa, $128.6 million, which that makes sense. I mean, of all things, in the wrong time of year to hit a deer, spring turkey hunting.
Yeah, we're going turkey hunting. We still went hunting, didn't we? Yes.
Well, and I'll tell you what, there's two things to be said. First, that's a testament to how early I go out turkey hunting. I can drive down the highway, hit a deer, call the police, have them come, make sure my vehicle's okay, write me up a report, sit on the side of the highway, still go pick up Nick, and get out to the blind with plenty of time. So that's terrible that
that's
I go
good
out there.
planning.
Yeah. But I hit a deer in April. I'm like, really? Driving down the highway, going 60, just came up out of the ditch and didn't have any chance. But the thing that the cop said, and I believe this, don't swerve. Just hit him.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just hit him.
Exactly.
Don't try to swerve. Just hit him.
Yep.
First off, just hit him. And then if you hit him, pull over and call 911. Hey, can I get an officer out here to write me up an accident report?
Yep.
It's much easier with your insurance.
Totally.
Because it sounds like when I talk to my insurance, there's a lot of people that, pull too far ahead and hit their garage door and then say they hit a deer. Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? So when you have an accident report and the cop says, you definitely hit a deer. Yeah. There's the hair, there's the deer, there's the blood. You hit a deer.
Yeah.
It's much easier to corroborate than than people say, oh, I hit a deer. Oh, that looks like like gray paint from a building or a mailbox. Oh no, that's not what happened. So that was interesting. Okay, just so we're straight, I want to make sure I say this. The cost associated with airport runway collisions in Iowa was $9,500. So there wasn't very many, but it had in here how many accidents there were in the state of Iowa. Can't find that part.
It's about 7,000 to 8,000 deer-related crashes per year statewide.
For vehicles.
For vehicles.
I was trying to figure out the airplane.
Oh, I see. I'm not familiar with that number. I would guess it's less than one.
Yeah, it was very, very few. Yeah. It doesn't even say. Well, 2 reported in the last 10 years. So
yeah.
So those guys probably have a really cool story to tell. Hopefully, it was when they were landing.
Right.
One of them's probably over here.
Yeah,
Mason City.
Well, that's why airports are all. That's why they're fenced in.
Yeah.
But still, they can jump the fences.
Right.
When I used to work in Southern Colorado, we would go to Colorado. We would fly out of Colorado Springs Airport, and part of it is because antelope don't jump fences. They sneak underneath of them. But there was a couple antelope bucks inside the Colorado Springs Airport that were absolute cranks, and everybody knew it.
Yeah.
Well, they got in there and they're like, this is pretty good. They're like, nobody bothers us. There's these airplanes that land, but they knew enough to stay off the runway, and they got big, and they were big.
Jeez.
Oh yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, well, and they didn't matter how high they put the fence.
Right.
Because that's what antelope do. They won't jump a fence. They slip underneath of them. So you always find these dugout spots where they'll crawl underneath the fences. Yeah. But anyway, it was really, really interesting as you looked. Just all the parts of the study were really, really intriguing. The economic side of things was really, really interesting.
Yeah. And the deer vehicle collision number's big, right? I mean, more than I think a lot of people would expect.
Right.
But we're talking about everybody that's a driver is basically chipping into that pot, because it's not just deer hunters spending money anymore. It's that almost every adult in Iowa drives.
Yes.
And so,
and when you do hit a deer, like what I was saying earlier, you take it into the shop and it costs you.
Oh yeah.
Fixing vehicles is not cheap.
No.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And a lot of that cost is due to the fatalities, which unfortunately we do have a small number of in Iowa compared to other states. Not unfortunately that it's relatively low, just that it happens at all, of course.
Yeah.
We might have 2 or 3 a year. States like Michigan and Wisconsin are closer to 20, maybe 15 to 20. Wow. So we're a lot below then. We have a smaller population, which leads to that as well. But obviously, the value of a human life is massive compared to the value of a vehicle. So it'll define it in the report. But a lot of that cost is due to loss of human life.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting too, because I feel like when you look at the deer collision part of it, you have to remember when the state of Iowa is doing what they do, they're not doing it. We've talked about this before. It's not just the best interest of hunters. It's the best interest of people that are just wildlife.
Yep.
People that just observe wildlife, just viewers.
Right.
And what's happening with insurance companies, what's happening with the Farm Bureau. It's everybody involved trying to come together to come up with the best solution
exactly
for everybody. Right. And I feel like that's what I really enjoyed about the study, is it really kind of shed light on all of that.
Yeah.
To help you really understand, okay, wow, there's more than just what I'm doing in hunting and how that might economically affect one way or the other what's happening. Yeah. There's also what's happening with deer collisions, because the reality is that the people that aren't hunting, what they all can relate to is hitting deer on the highway.
Yeah. Right.
Because I know I've had the conversation multiple times. Oh man, I can't believe you shoot deer. They're so beautiful. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But you know what? It's not very fun when they're standing in the middle of the highway, is it? Yeah. And when you're slamming on your brake and you smoke one,
Right.
Like, heck, last year I was driving back from the farm late at night, and it was a looked like a husband wife with their mom, so it'd been like a husband wife, and it would have been like a grandma hit a deer, and they didn't even pull over. They just stopped in the middle of the road. They didn't have their hazards on, and it's at night, and I'm coming down the highway 18 between Britt and Gardner. And I pull up, I come up to it, I'm like, great, what happened? So I pull over, I put my hazards on. I get out and I walk up, and they're all standing at the front of the vehicle, just looking down at the ground. And here's a big old doe laying there on the road. And they smoked her. Well, must have hit her on the back end because her legs were broken, and her front legs were working, but she was on the road, and she was trying to, she was doing the whole hoofing on the road. And they looked at me and they're looking down, and I'm like, first thing I was like, everybody okay? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, how about you like put your hazards on in your car? Like, I'm like kind of pissed, Yeah. And they're like, well, what do we do? I'm like, have you called 911? And they're like, no. I'm like, just call 911, tell them you hit a deer. It'll get a cop out here and get somebody, like, I can't say, I'm like not happy, right? I'm like, I'm looking at this deer and I feel real bad. And they're like, what do we do? And I was like, well, I'm a hunter, so I'll figure this out. And so I just started talking to the deer. I'm like, all right, you got to move. You know what I mean? Like, come on. So I kind of like got up to it and got kind of close to it. Well, then it felt like I was going to attack it. So then it was trying to hoof its way off, and I got it. I didn't have to touch or anything, but I'm like, come on, you got to get moving. So it got off the road, and then it kind of rolled down in the ditch. And I just told him, I said, it's down there. Tell the cop, and he'll know what to do. Or he'll shoot it, or he'll get the DNR out here or somebody. But pull ahead, get off the highway. Oh, okay. And you could tell they were just dazed.
Yeah.
Not hunters at all.
Right.
But that's the experience that a lot of non-hunters have with deer.
Right.
And so I feel like we do play a key part in that.
Absolutely.
I'm not going on hunting thinking, you know what, I want to shoot deer so I don't see them on the highway. But that is a part of it.
Big part of it.
You know what I mean? And that's the I feel like that's how we can make it relatable.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? Because it's not like if you're a non-hunter, it doesn't mean you have to be an anti-hunter.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like we all fit together in this.
Mm-hmm. And that's probably, like you said, the most universally relatable figure in there is the vehicle collisions.
Yeah.
What makes it interesting, we've done some further analysis after this study has come out on, looking at hotspots and things like that. And you could basically create the same maps looking at population hotspots. Like where are humans in the state? Of course, that's completely intuitive. Like you can't hit a lot of deer if you don't have a lot of drivers. But I made a simple model where every county, the deer vehicle collision rate was set as a function of human density and deer density, now that we have deer density.
Yeah.
And it was the first time that I've really put those numbers together to see where's the effect coming from?
Yeah.
And just a very simple linear model showed that there is no statistical relationship with deer density and deer vehicle collisions.
Really?
An extremely significant relationship with human population and deer vehicle collisions.
Okay.
And it makes sense. I mean, if you look at some of those really high deer density counties, they don't have a lot of accidents because they're rural and not a lot of folks live there. On the other hand, Sioux City,
Iowa City.
Well, even out west, Sioux City, Council Bluffs, there's a lot of deer that get hit there. There's next to no deer in that part of the state.
Interesting.
But they get hit.
Crazy.
They get hit more than they do in
because
Centerville.
There's just a lot of people there.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
So it's not, so that makes it, but that's an important thing, right? Because if we're managing deer for all of these things to minimize the costs, well, we have to understand that there's only so much we can do about minimizing deer vehicle collisions from a population management standpoint.
Yes.
We could cut the population in half. We might not see less accidents.
Yes. So is there, do you think moving forward, there'll be any type of collaboration or partnership with Department of Natural Resources and like the Department of Transportation to say, okay, we know these are where there's high densities, high population densities. We know these where these busy roads are. How do we avoid having these deer cross these roads? Because we know there's a lot of people that are just cooking this every day.
I mean, that's something our department would be open to for sure.
I feel like there's a lot of opportunity there.
Collaboration. So the DOT is involved in our Deer Study Advisory Committee meetings. I think the department, there's great communication back and forth, and they know the data we keep. And I think it's a tricky one, right? Because like I said, it's not so simple as, 10 deer equals X amount of accidents.
Yes.
It's more complicated than that. And deer tend to like sort of that suburban landscape where they don't have any pressure on them and there's food and safety. And that doesn't bode well for drivers.
Right. Well, it's like you drive down I-35 and you go south of here towards Ames, you hit the Dow's exit, and it's where the Iowa River cuts across I-35, and they've got high fences. There's actually public land on both sides of the interstate right there.
Yeah.
And they've got high fences, and they've got, they basically got these like crossing gates.
Oh, sure.
Which are like these big metal, like they just point, and they point into the public land. So if a deer got caught in the middle, if he gets up against the fence, and he walks that fence, he comes to a point where the fence jogs, and he can walk right through it. But if you try to come out the other way, they're pointing.
Yep.
Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If you drive back towards Ames today or towards Boone, you take I-35, you hit Dow's exit, you hit the Iowa River, you'll see that right on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Colorado does that where they basically have like jumps like that.
Overpasses.
Overpasses. Or they'll have fences, right? Where where an elk could, if there's like where they migrate, where the fence literally they put a ramp right up to where they can jump over the fence, and then they have a spot where they can walk back through on the other side.
Yeah.
And vice versa. But yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah,
I never would have thought that. I would have thought it would have been more about the population of the deer. But
right.
It sounds like
and I think most people would.
Yes.
It's just not what the data shows.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting.
It does make sense though, because you look at like southern Iowa, where the deer population is so high, but there just is not many people down there. Mm-hmm. So it does make sense.
Yep.
If you think about it.
Well, even if you look at like, this is real specific, but if you go along the south side of Clear Lake, on the south side of Clear Lake, there's a blacktop that goes around the lake that always used to be 55. Well, they actually switched it to 45 just like a year ago. And when they switched it, I was like, I wonder if that was because there are so many deer that cross that road. But the thing of it is there's a ton of people that use that road. That road is so busy in summer because everybody's like, you know what? I'm going to skip Clear Lake. And they just get on that back road. And you go on that road in the summer, it's just constant cars. Well, you know what we'll do? We'll just slow everybody down a little bit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Well, at 45 compared to 60 or 50 to 60, you just got a little bit more time to react.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Yep. So, yeah, I think things like that, obviously, like our vehicles are progressing. There's like crazy things that they can do now, like these newer models in terms of collision detection and
braking and all that.
Braking, I have hope that as the years go on, we'll make strides in that manner. But I think that's going to be how we minimize that.
Yeah.
It is a substantial cost. There's also an industry that's built around it, body shops, that were not included in that study.
Yes.
Again, outside of the scope. But yeah, I mean, it's money moving somewhere.
Right.
Definitely.
Right. And like I said, even look at Des Moines. You drive around Des Moines. You drive on the whatever Highway 65 technically that goes around the east and then the south side of Des Moines towards the airport. That's the Des Moines River's all right through there. And man, and there's our I-80 coming around through Des Moines.
Totally.
Man, you get cooking along there by the Des Moines River.
Yeah.
And it's not like you see a bunch of high fences right there.
No.
You know, you're like, so it's like, maybe is that the next step, right? Is this thing? It's like, okay, we've got $128 million here that's costing us every year. So how much does it cost to put in fences?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
But then there's probably something to be said about how that affects deer movement as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Right? Is it okay to block them where they can't go from here to there type thing?
Yeah. Lot to consider.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
It's crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot of really, really cool stuff with this deer study, man. I was really, really excited to look through that. And like I said, if you're listening to this, take the opportunity. I know there's a lot there. The summary at the beginning is pretty awesome and it goes through it, but to really dive in and start to look at, it's pretty cool too. In the middle, it's got all the densities. And again, based off of the antlered buck harvest, the bow survey, the crash data, and then the spotlight survey. So it goes through it step by step for each county. So you can really see specific to your area. Like even around here, because again, we're in management unit, the Clear Lake management unit. It was interesting because the bow hunt survey was super low for Cerro Gordo, but then Hancock County, it was like crazy high.
Yeah.
So is that just like, okay, well, there's a couple people that are just really gung-ho about surveying, but you even talked about in about the survey too. It's like, you have to understand that there's a little bit of a vested interest there as well, one way or the other, because you could be like, well, you know what, I'm going to do a survey. I ain't saying anything. You know, I'm just not seeing any deer.
Yeah.
Or you're like, you know what? I'm going to say I'm seeing more than I'm seeing. Yeah. You know, like
it's possible.
Yeah. So you have to take that into account.
Yep.
There's just so much there.
And we've got, on average, dozens of hunters contributing in every county. So we'd hope that if there are people doing that it would balance out in the data. But it's entirely possible. And our bow hunters are not spread out evenly across the state, of course, as you guys know up here. So yep. And so that's why you see the data be a little more noisy, jumping around a little more in those counties. But that's why we put all the data on one figure. Yeah. I mean, that's a testament to like how we're going to continue to manage deer, is using all the data we can. We have a lot of data. We also have a lot of really good inroads and relationships with our hunters and landowners all over the state. And so continuing to factor that information in is going to be key to moving forward.
Yeah. The way the bow hunter survey, is it still done by paper, or is that okay? Because
both. Well, now we just offered an online offering last year. So any bow hunter that's bought a license in the last few years who has their email connected to their DNR account will get an invitation to participate online.
Okay.
Sweet.
Because that's the thing. I feel like as the DNR moves forward, my suggestion would be put as much of it in the app as you can.
Yep.
I mean, from my perspective, if there was a way that you could go onto the app, I feel like it could get so much more detail too, right? Like obviously there's going to be some discrepancy in there, but if you could have it in the app where you could go and say, just go into the app at any day and be like, I'm logging into my account. And you could say, this is where I was hunting. If you weren't, like, to your point, I love that, cagey. If you weren't trying to be if you were trying to be cagey about where you're going, just not tell where you were.
Yeah.
Or roughly, I'm in this county.
Yep. That's all we need to know.
Yeah, just say I'm in this county, and then these are the deer I saw. And if it was that easy on the app just to submit it, I would do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
You know, because I think that's the thing. At certain points, it comes on like, oh, I got to do the survey.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
You know? But if it was that easy, you could just, I get done hunting, or I'm out hunting, or I'm done at the end of the day, and I just go on there and I log it in. I feel like the app is super handy to be able to look at the reg book on there, to be able to see your tags, what's not filled, what's filled. I feel like that app just got so much opportunity to be developed.
Totally. I think so. And I think, getting that EHD reporting tool on there would be huge.
Yes,
definitely.
Just for anyone listening, I mean, that is the way that we can continue to manage for a healthy deer population with this recurring disease, is by understanding it. And we can't do it without using our hunters and landowners. So contributing data to that just puts our department in a better position to manage, whether that's reducing quotas in the next year or something else. It's really difficult to justify things like that if we just have no data.
Right. Well, and I think the thing that I would piggyback onto that is if you have questions, call your biologist. These guys they're willing to talk to you. They're state paid employees. That's their job. Right.
Yeah,
They're there to, it's about the communication. Not only that, but upcoming, when are the meetings? Those are in
February. End of February.
End of February. So we'll be around.
Yep.
So if you're around in the end of February, they post where these meetings are. They have them in every area.
Yep. Every management unit. So
Yes.
16 throughout the state over the course of a week.
So take the time one evening to go and sit through the meeting. There's some really interesting information about all the different departments, whether it's predators or whitetail or waterfowl or pheasants or whatever it might be. They kind of give a summary of that area or what else is going on in the state. And if you have concerns you want to talk about, raise your hand. It gets written down.
Yeah.
Probably somewhere along the way, somebody said, hey, you know what? We use shotguns in Iowa. Why don't we look at using some straight wall cartridges? That's pretty much like a shotgun. Right. Now look at us. Everybody and their mom's got a lever action.
Yeah.
I keep raising my hand saying, hey, let us use red lights for predators. That's what I keep raising my hand on.
Yeah.
Especially because you can spotlight in Iowa, but you can't use red lights for predator hunting. I'm like, come on. And if you say, well, then, and my caveat, every year they say, well, you know how much that would lead to poaching? I said, fine. No red lights during the deer season then. No red lights during deer season. January 10th through until October 1st or whatever it is whenever the first deer season starts, real deer season starts, from January 10th until the first deer season, red lights for predator hunting. There would be a ton more people predator hunting. I'll tell you that for free, because the barrier of entry for thermal and all that is so dang expensive.
Yeah.
I just can't do it.
Right.
But to buy a red light, whoop-de-doo.
Yeah.
Right? But anyway, pass that along, please. I want that passed so bad. If they ever do that, I swear I'm going to go. There's a couple guys at the I wish I knew who they were. If they're listening, I'm sorry. But there was a couple guys at the Iowa Deer Classic a couple years ago that he must have just been having a real bad day. Or maybe it's just my tone, because sometimes I think my tone makes me sound like a real. But I walked up and I was like, hey, man. I was like, they were like, you can talk to him.
Oh, a conservation officer at the booth. Yeah.
And I was like, hey, just a suggestion. Like, why can't we use red lights? And he was like, bro, you know how many people are going to blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, and I like teed off on it because I'm like, bro, like, you're here to talk to people. Like, this is what your job is. Like, I don't know if you had to come here because so you're supposed to like work with people, but this isn't working. I'm like, let me talk to your boss. Like, there's somebody here that's more higher up than you. Let me talk to him. So then they had that guy come over and he's like, I'm really sorry for that guy. But it's just like, I don't know. It's just weird. Like, I was like, dude, I'm not trying to like throw a big tizzy. I'm just saying, like, it's a good idea. Like, people would buy red lights and people would do predator hunting. But you can use spotlights. You can go out there and spotlight. So why are we even having this discussion? Like, why aren't they just letting us do it? But the guy, man, he was like, he must have had some bad experience with poaching because he was like teeing off on me about it.
Oh, I'm sure that's a hard booth to sit in that day.
Oh, yeah. And again, because they're just how many people, or like guys that maybe they dealt with and they see them walking down the aisle. Yeah. So I was like, it was just kind of funny. But he was like really not happy. But anyway, that was maybe we should cut all that out. But it was funny because he was like, I think he was like, he's like, well, who are you? And I'm like, hi, my name's Cole Tanner. I work at Ozonics. We have a booth right down the way. You're welcome to stop by. And they all did. They came down to like talk to us. And I'm like, dude, I don't have anything to hide. I'm just saying, man, let's just have a conversation. You don't have to be all mad about it. I'm just like, just asking you. But if you're going to be disrespectful, like, you're not going to get respect from me back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry if you had a bad day or somebody else just walked by. Like, that wasn't me. I'm just trying to talk to you. Yeah. It says talk to a DNR officer. Right. You're a DNR officer. So who else am I supposed to talk to? You know? Anyway. I'm still mad about that. That was years ago.
I can tell.
Well, it just sucks because like what kind of bothered me about that is, and that's why I appreciate Jace so much, because you're willing to have good conversation. Exactly. And you realize that like part of what I think that what I feel like I've experienced from you, Jason, what I hear you saying a lot is that there is a relationship with the public. There's a relationship with the hunters. And you, of all people, like with Wisconsin, you hear a lot of people with Minnesota that are not on board. Yep. They don't believe in it.
Right.
They don't believe in what the state is doing. And no matter what, there's like the public always has this pessimistic perspective.
Yep.
And they're just like, oh, they feel like they're always being slighted.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so when that guy was like that towards me, I was like, man, dude, if you're doing that to me, like, what are you doing to everybody else that you deal with?
Right.
Does that make sense? Like, and the thing I don't know is who knows how many like total just dinglings that guy has to deal with.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
With double fist and a tall boy. And
yeah. And like the 16-ounce big huge cans. And it's like, oh, you know what?
Yeah.
You screwed over my friend Bobby, and he was really nice. You know, he's in jail now for 3 years. It's like, well, probably because that's where he needs to be. You know what I mean? But anyway, I just think it's nice that you're here, Jason. It's really awesome to get to have good conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Appreciate that. No, happy to come and talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
What else, Jace? Is there anything else that you feel like we didn't cover that you want to talk about?
Man, I think we hit all the stuff. No, I'm glad you found this report interesting. I thought of you right away. I'm like, got a little time in my schedule, so I thought it'd be cool to talk about it. And
absolutely.
Yeah, glad it came up.
No, I really appreciate it. Do you feel like the DNR and the Iowa State University has gotten the type of response from the legislature that you were expecting? I mean, or what type of response did you get?
We've gotten no response because the session hasn't started yet.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. So the legislative session begins, I think, January 11th. It's always the day after early Muzz ends or late Muzz ends. But so I haven't had any interactions with legislators about it. Yeah. Obviously, there's folks that are looking through it and are interested in it.
Yeah.
Some special interest groups that are doing the same. But yeah, I think time will tell.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
I guess kind of switching gears, how was the season for you this year?
It was awesome. We saw it on Instagram. Mr. Buck Killer over here. But you had two big things happen.
Yeah.
You killed a nice deer and you got engaged.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, he's thinking of something else.
Well, I shot a mule deer as well, but so I didn't know if that was one.
You did?
I did, yeah.
Oh, dang. That's awesome.
Yeah. Great season, though. Yeah, early Muzz, I struggled a little to find a buck. I was more focused on helping my fiance, then girlfriend, get her deer. She actually got her first buck with a muzzleloader opening day.
There you go.
Sitting by herself.
Early Muzz, too.
Yeah. It was awesome. It was a place that we'd scouted together. We were kind of sitting up. I told you guys a little bit about my strategy this year.
Yep.
And by the time early Muzz started, a lot of the deer were gone. But you know how that works.
Yeah.
But that first evening, she had a 2-year-old come through and shot it at, I think, 125 yards.
Awesome.
Which is a poke, for a gun that's sighted in for 50.
Not that, especially during early Muzz. A lot of people, guys that are serious Muzz hunters, know that muzzleloaders that time of year can be a little tricky, right? Even just shooting them, right?
Temp fluctuations.
Absolutely.
I had a hang fire.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just when you hear guys that are hunting early Muzz, you're like, okay, you're hunting early Muzz. And if you've done it more than once, you're doing it because you know how your gun is going to react, because it's just a little bit easier in the winter cold. That fluctuation can really mess with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. I had a hang fire on a doe because of, I think, I left it loaded for a few days just because that's what you do. And we had some big temp swings and humidity swings, and I think it just let a little moisture in the powder. And so it wasn't a misfire. I shot and heard the click, and then I took my face off the gun and started lifting it up, as my reaction, and then it shot sailed probably 20 feet over the deer's back.
Right.
But it was a doe. Luckily, I wasn't aiming at a big buck, or I would have probably thrown it like a shot put. But
yard dart. Plunk.
But yeah, we're between the two of us, we put 5 deer in the freezer this year, so we're sitting great. I do want to get one more for late muzz, and then we'll be really good. But we ate a lot of venison, so
that's
awesome. Man.
Yep,
that's awesome.
I had one hunt during the rut and got it done. It was just right place, right time.
Showed me the picture. That's awesome.
November 1st. I normally don't even get serious until November. I had an encounter with the buck I was going after that I was scouting all season on opener. And it was 15 yards away. Should have killed it. It just came on the wrong side of me. And if you guys want to hear the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was set up for this deer.
Okay.
And I'd spent several evenings glassing him up, and I was trying to figure out where he walked out of the woods. And there wasn't many options because it's all willows. So I pretty much had to climb in the tree I was sitting in. I was very exposed. So I just stayed standing the whole time. And I had this little open lane for about 15 yards that I thought he was going to walk through. And like 3 different does had come through, and each one busted me visually. I don't think they smelled me, but they just saw me. And so I thought, okay, I got to make this happen.
Yeah.
And the buck's probably going to be, catch me before these does were. And I'd seen like 20 deer at that point, but no bucks. It was like last 15 minutes of daylight, and I catch some movement in the thick stuff, and I just see a really long tine, and I knew right away it was that buck. He was just really tall 8-pointer. And so I basically got my bow around the tree like this, but then he starts coming this way, so I had to,
Oh, yeah.
And I see him start to come around, and it's going to be perfect. He's already in bow range. I just couldn't shoot him. And so I figured I'd pull back before he got in sight of me. As I was pulling back, he caught me. And so, I'm pulling back.
Isn't it wild how they do that?
It's crazy.
Golly.
I thought I had the tree blocking, but there must have just been enough movement. And so I'm pulled back, not even looking through my peep, and I can just see, half his head, and he pokes it out a little further, and I knew it was over. And so I tried to, I stood there for like 30 seconds thinking like maybe he'll come out, and he wasn't. So eventually I just tried to see if I could squeak a shot, and he was gone before it was.
Well, I'll tell you what, like I said, if you do any research and just read about deer eyesight, they see best right at last light in that low light.
Yep.
So in that low light situation, that's not perfect for us. It's perfect for him.
Exactly.
I mean, he's just really, like, it's like when that's just, everything is just the most crisp is right there.
Yep. Yeah.
And so he was just really on you.
And come to find out, I wasn't the only hunter after him in there. So I had encountered another guy who was bow hunting during muzz season.
Okay.
And it was the day that I ended up just shooting a doe out of that spot. Just kind of like last minute, wanted to fill my tag. And, and I've never had a problem with shooting does. I just,
Yeah.
So I was seeing 10 to 12 at night there. So I wasn't really jumping any, I knew I could just take one on the last day.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was talking to him, and I could tell that, I was like, you come here a lot? And he's like, yeah. I was like, oh yeah, I just, I usually when I bow hunt, I'm sitting over there. And he's like, man, I saw the tallest deer of my life out of that tree, and busted like 2 years ago. He was huge. And I was like, really, really tall 8-pointer. And then we knew we were talking about the same deer, which is crazy that 2 years ago he was a considerably tall, big deer.
That's awesome.
I would have loved to have gotten my hands on him, but maybe next year.
Yeah.
I probably, he probably never stepped foot on public in daylight after that encounter, because I was only hunting on about 100-yard margin of public before it got into a huge private piece. So but yeah, bow season was awesome. I just set up one of the worst walks of my life, because I had, I had my stand and my sticks, nothing out of the ordinary, but I hadn't really gone the route that I was going to try to take. And it ended up being over an hour between walking out of my truck and getting to the base of my tree.
Whoa.
And both my legs were soaking wet. I'd fallen into a creek with the stand on my back. Like, I was in a pretty bad mood. Climb up, I'm, freezing, soaking wet.
The last 15 minutes, it's not even, you're not walking, you're marching. Right. Yeah, you're just like, why am I doing this? It's so stupid. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But it worked out great. I mean, it was the first deer I saw, and wasn't huge. It was just a 130-inch 8-pointer, and I knew there was birds to hunt. And
That's awesome.
That's
man.
funny.
That was great.
So awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Even better than that, my fiance got her first deer with a bow, which was a nice 2-year-old 8-pointer.
There you go.
Heck yeah, dude.
It was awesome. I mean, she's pulling back 37 pounds, so everything had to be perfect.
Yeah.
Close, high
That's
percentage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. 9-yard shot. So she made a great shot, and
Yeah, that's
easy
awesome.
recovery. It was awesome.
That's
That
awesome.
is sweet.
That's interesting to hear about the 37-pound thing because my boy Jet, he's 8, and that's, man, his thing. He wants to start bow hunting so bad.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to figure out. I used to be a recurve guy. That's what I did. I shot a recurve for a long time. I shot a recurve at 48 pounds. I felt great about it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And smoked through a bunch of deer. Just double long straight pastures. You can kill deer with a lot less weight. It's just got to be more perfect.
Yep.
And that's why I keep going around with Jet. Is like, okay, well, how low could I take him down to? You know what I mean?
Yep.
And then how close do I have to get him?
Right.
You know? And that's interesting to hear that.
Yeah. So everything was 20 or closer for her shots.
Yep.
And it was like, definitely no frontal shots.
Yep.
Definitely no quartering shots.
Yeah,
like it's got to be perfect.
Yep. Broadside quartering away. Stick with those.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. The broadside quartering ways. Yeah, that's what it'll be for my boy Jet. When I start taking him, it'll be just that broadside quartering way.
Yeah. Heck
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that's awesome, man. And then where'd you kill the mule deer at?
South Dakota.
Oh, there you go.
Yep. So my uncle lives out there, and he's got a big ranch that he hunts. And
Sweet.
yeah, he had me and my buddy come out, and we both came away with some nice bucks. And
Cool.
nothing huge. I mean, I don't have any standard of reference for mule deer, but it was the coolest hunt. I saw 30 or 40 mule deer on the first day.
Cool.
We only had 2 days to hunt out there, so I shot mine, last 30 minutes of the hunt.
Cool.
It was cool.
That's awesome.
It was a deer that I located at first light that morning.
Yeah.
Decided to try to find a different one and was luckily able to find him pretty close to where I found him in the morning. And
That's
he was tending a hot doe, so he wasn't trying to move.
Yeah.
Yep.
Heck yeah. That's
It was awesome.
That's
450-yard shot. So
Dang.
yeah, it was different kind of hunt.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, that's fun. Man, rifles, it's fun to reach out and touch them.
Did you guys have much luck deer?
Our season was kind of up and down.
Yeah.
I did a lot of dep hunting early, like in the summer, and killed 5 does and 3 hunts. That was pretty cool.
Sweet.
Yeah. Shot a couple doubles. So that was pretty neat. And then I shot a doe opening day, October 1st. That was pretty cool. And then my big goal all season was really to try to get Nick on something.
Yeah.
And so it was really, I have 2 permission pieces, and then I've got a couple public spots that we watch really hard. Well, the one public spot that went out the window right off the bat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we were just kind of, and it's funny how you talked about that earlier. Like we really kind of self-regulated because we were just like, well, we're not going to hunt that.
We're not gonna go there.
Yep.
We're not, we had doe takes for Cerro Gordo County, and we're like, well, we're not going to go there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, so I hunted the permission pieces pretty hard, and putting Nick kind of in the best spots, and we played cat and mouse with a buck that we call World Traveler. We had good pictures of him last year. He's just a really nice Big 10.
Perfect
Nice.
Big 10 pointer.
Yep, perfect Big 10. And played cat and mouse with him last year, and then we had him on like mineral through the summer on trail camera, and then we were kind of trying to figure out where his home range was, and for whatever reason he really rutted kind of right on us this year.
There.
Yeah. And I actually had him again try to put Nick in the best spot, and then he walks out in front of me. But it was kind of a bang play. He kind of came in from my right, and he was on the upwind side. It was the sun had just come up, so it was like really blaring down on me. And I was just picking up my bow, kind of had my bow just around, and he kind of looked up right at me. Kind of looked up, looked back, and I looked back up, and I'm like frozen,
Yeah.
And then he kind of just went up through the woods, didn't blow or anything, just was like, okay, I don't want to go that way. And then got out of my sight, and then he actually walked right to Nick, which was just by pure chance.
Oh, yeah. All of a sudden, I saw him coming right to me, and he was probably at like 60 yards. And you could tell he was just kind of just cruising a little bit. So I grunted at him. He whipped his head right at me. Like, I'm like, oh, man, he definitely heard me. And I'm in a saddle, so I had the tree between me and him. So I was kind of just tucked behind that tree, just kind of watching him. So he keeps coming towards me, and he starts going to the right a little bit. And so I snort wheezed at him, and that he was like whipped at me. And then he like kind of started almost trotting towards me. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is about to happen. Like there's no way he's not coming right to me. And then I don't know what happened. I don't know if there was another doe, because there was 3 does that had just came by before, and he just headed west and then north and out of our lives. But
I felt like the rest of the year we just played a lot of cat and mouse.
Yep.
Saw him from afar a couple times.
Yep, we saw him just kind of like on the neighboring property where we can kind of see into.
Yep.
We could see him on there. And like you said, just really trying to put him on stuff. So I was kind of sitting in the secondary spots all the time. And then we had a pretty cool encounter towards the end of the year. We actually started doing a lot of just hunting off the ground.
Yeah.
Cool. We were hunting in some tall grass where where it was really conducive to like a south wind. And it felt like for us around here, the rut felt like everything hit a little bit later.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It all felt like a couple weeks behind.
Okay.
You know, and so usually by November in the teens, they're kind of zombie walking, right? They're still out there cruising. We felt like we saw that right before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so we were on a couple deer that were like, okay, I had seen them a few days before, like, okay, let's try this on the ground.
Getting a lot of pictures of them at the spot where we tried to sit too.
Yeah, kind of a corner where they just kind of walk out. And sure enough, at like 2:33 in the afternoon, he just walks out, just cruising through and made a big loop around us, grunt and snort wheezed. He came back in and he walked out in the middle of this field at 50, 60 yards, just kind of stood there. And then finally went to make his move to kind of get around on the downwind of what he was hearing. And then he just kind of couldn't get drawn. But yeah, we had a good year. Like I said, I'm always doing a lot of depredation hunting. And like I said, some of the depredation tags I got really late. So that kind of put me in a little bit of pickle. Usually I would have tried to harvest those deer a lot earlier.
Yeah.
And then, and like you said, that the public spot kind of threw us for a little bit of a curveball because we were really counting on that.
I think we were really planning on putting a lot of time there. So once we saw that wasn't going to be an option, it was kind of like, okay, we need to
a little bit of a regroup.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, like I said, I think one of the big highlights was Nick shot a double. That was pretty cool. He shot a double on does.
Yeah, I shot 2 does in one night.
Awesome.
Yep. So that was pretty neat. Like that was kind of an example of like, it was actually World Traveler. We had him on camera, and it's like, okay, let's try to go in there, and went in there, and then all of a sudden he just couple does within 20 minutes. You know,
Sweet.
So that was kind of a neat deal. But yeah, like I said, got a little bit of season left.
Yep.
And like I said, he's got his uncle and his cousin that are come down for late muzz, and I'll be trying to help them out a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like that's been my real thing this year. I've really enjoyed, I don't know, it's almost like I felt like that's been my whole 2024. Like even spring turkey hunting, I only hunted myself in the spring like a couple times. I was really trying to get you one, and I was trying to get my boy a couple. And then this deer season too, it's just like, I still have the fire and passion. I would love to go out and kill as many deer as I possibly can.
Yeah.
But I felt like I was really just trying to get everybody else on stuff.
Yeah.
And just kind of like, it's fine. You know what I mean? And part of it is I've got enough deer. I've got enough meat in the freezer still.
Yeah.
That it's just like, and I love hushing them, but but man, you'll have to show them the pictures of that doe you shot.
Yeah, I will.
Oh my
Big
goodness. Holy cow.
doe, yeah.
She was big.
Yeah.
I wish you would have weighed her, but man, her head, like you could lay your hand, like the back of your palm on the back of her head, put your other hand, and it wouldn't reach the tip of her nose.
Jeez.
She was
a big block head.
She was a big old deer.
Yeah.
So that was pretty neat. Yeah. But yeah, no, like I said, it's always great to be out there. And but yeah, it just felt like everything hit a little late, and it just I don't know, it was just kind of
year felt weird.
It just felt a little weird.
Yeah.
It just felt a little weird.
Yeah.
It's like, you kind of feel like my brother-in-law, he's like, oh man, I just can't wait for those magical rut hunts. I didn't have but one kind of magical rut hunt.
Yeah.
It just felt like those hunts just didn't fall in. And I felt like a lot of people you were talking to kind of experienced the same thing. Or like, okay, man, it feels like everything's like kind of in slow motion, and then it kind of feels like it's picking up, and then it feels like it's not. It just felt real odd.
Over.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's November 20th. Like, crap, where did it all go? It just felt kind of weird this year.
Yeah.
It's weird how the rut just lays out a little differently every year, and you kind of don't know what you know till you know it.
Yeah.
You know?
It was a warm year.
Yeah,
for sure.
The warm didn't help either.
No.
I mean, gosh, I didn't even wear all my cold weather stuff until about Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
It's just tricky when it's like that.
Yeah.
I know. My head just goes a million places when November comes around, and then with trying to get Catherine a deer. I mean, it was a struggle because it's like she had a climber, doesn't particularly like to use it, and I don't blame her.
Yeah.
It's like something you got to get
Right.
Absolutely.
So I understand that. She doesn't want to hang a stand every hunt, and that's my style. So I didn't have a lot to hand her.
Yeah.
So honestly, she relied on existing tree stands on public land, and it's like, most of them are in a decent enough spot, give it a shot. And so she was hunting them weekdays mostly, and never had any bad encounters or anything. And we can mostly tell who's using the stands and stuff like that. But it was a good strategy. I mean, it let her hunt a lot of different spots for different winds, and she was always making the call where she wanted to go and stuff.
That's awesome.
It was really cool. Her getting that buck. I had my truck all loaded up, and I was going to go pheasant hunting with my dog because I was already tagged out, and she was still at it. I, to be honest, wasn't expecting her to be successful just because it's a difficult thing. And so I was pulling out of my driveway, and I get a call. I'm like, oh, this has got to be good, or not, But I was happy to unpack the truck and give her a hand. It was cool. Awesome. No, she walked almost a mile to get to that spot.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Sweet.
Where? What type of dog do you use for pheasant hunting?
I've got a poodle pointer.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep. And so I don't know if you're familiar, kind of an obscure breed. It sounds like a mix, but it's a hardcore versatile bird dog from Germany, basically. Cool. So there's a breeder not far from here in Fairmont, Minnesota.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's who I got my dog from, and he's a beast. I mean, very different experience than when I had a spaniel before. It was like, lovey, cuddly house dog, and did pretty good in the field.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he was like a complete demon for the first year. I'm just coming around to liking him, to be honest.
Yeah.
like half joking, but not.
Well, dude, that's the thing about dogs. A lot of people don't realize, So my wife got me a golden retriever 2 years ago for Christmas. I always wanted a dog. I had dogs when I was a kid. I wanted a dog. So my brother-in-law and sister had a purebred golden retriever. So we got one of their puppies, and I named him Gus. And the thing about when you raise a puppy, the thing you got to remember is they're still going to be a dog.
Right.
They're dogs. They're still a dog.
Yeah.
They're gonna eat a sock, and they're gonna chew on the carpet, and they're gonna pee and poop because that's just what they do.
Yep.
They're still a dog.
Oh yeah.
You're not gonna train it out of them. You know what I
Right.
mean? They're still a dog. I mean, they're not a human.
Right.
They're a dog. They're not a baby. They're not a person. They're a dog. And they're still gonna be a dog.
Right.
And when they're little, man, they're just a huge pain in the butt.
Yeah, they can be. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Otto is just a high octane, high drive dog.
I just started liking him.
Yeah. Well, it helped when we got him neutered. That took him down a couple gears.
Yeah.
And it was great. It's great now. He's a pretty good dog in the house, and he's still one. So I'm really optimistic about things. But for before my fiance moved in, it was like, day in, day out.
Did you do all the trading yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
So that's where I kind of got a little spoiled. There's a place north of Clear Lake that I sent Gus to.
Okay.
Now, I didn't want to do it for the hunting side of things. I just wanted general obedience.
Yep.
And the more research I did, I realized I'm like, man, I felt like I was going to be the weak link.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
I'd never trained a dog. I wasn't a professional dog trainer. I'm like, golly, I feel like I'm going to do harm than more good. So I got a hold of this guy, and I said, listen, he does all these hunting trials and he mostly does labs and has all these world champion lab hunting trial dogs. They go down to Texas in the winter, and he's won all these world championships, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, I just want general obedience. I want him to sit, stay. I want him to respect an electric collar. Like, can you help me? Absolutely. And so we sent him there for 2 months, and he came back, and he was a machine when he came back.
Nice.
And he was really good. And he died.
Sorry.
He died. He got sick I don't even know why.
Yeah.
He just got sick, and then he got better, and then he died.
Yeah.
Just found him. It was actually the day before we went to the Iowa Deer Classic. He died on February 29th.
That's terrible.
The day that we were going to the Iowa Deer Classic.
The day we were going to the Iowa Deer Classic that morning. It was a Thursday.
Yeah, it was terrible.
He had been sick for a couple weeks. He wasn't eating or drinking hardly anything. That's a bad thing is he would listen to me, but he wouldn't listen to anybody else, right? So my wife, he was always just a real pain for her. And I think he jumped up on the counter and ate something. And then it got him real sick, and we took him to the doc, and he's like, we can do all this. We can do all these tests and everything. He's like, he's just sick. Just give him some time. So he started drinking water, started eating again. And then the next day he was dead. So I'm dead in his kennel. But yeah, man, dogs are tricky.
Yeah.
They're fun. And like I said, I wish I had a dog right now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I've been there. My first dog I got in 2019, and she passed away pretty shortly before I got Otto. I mean, she was just barely 3.
Yeah.
I'd gotten 2 seasons of hunting with her, and it was the weirdest thing. Like, I still don't know what happened, but she got really sick, and took her to the vet. Didn't know what was wrong with her. Took her to the ISU vet lab. And they were like, yeah, her kidneys are like 90% scar tissue. Or, I mean, it was like they were pretty straight with me. You know, you can spend over $10,000 and you might get a brain dead dog back.
Right. Well, that's what the vet said to me. He's like, here's the deal. He's like, we can run all these tests and we could spend thousands of dollars. He's sick, and he's like, dogs get sick all the time. He's like, just give him some time. And then once he died, I went in there and he's like, again, we can spend thousands of dollars and we can do an autopsy and I can tell you exactly what happened. Still gonna be dead.
Yeah.
He's like, and he was really straight with me. He's like, I'm just telling you.
Right.
He's like, I don't know what to tell you.
Right.
And so, but yeah, it's just wild how you just never know.
Nope.
You just never know.
It's part of the deal, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's part of the deal about pets is they're gonna last. They're gonna live about 10 years.
Finite. Yep.
And it's gonna be over.
Yep.
I don't know if you follow sports or Kirk Herbstreit. He's a college football announcer. He has dogs, and he had a golden retriever named Ben. He followed him around all over. He'd go to game days and he'd be on college game day. He died during the season.
Yeah.
And they had that on SportsCenter. They did all these things for him. And man, Kirk Herbstreit was just a mess.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And it is, man. It's tough.
It's hard, man.
I've cried in front of probably 5 people.
Yeah.
He was one of them because he was there that day.
Oh yeah.
When we had to take Gus, and I was a crying ball bag.
I've been there.
Oh man, it's tough.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that's awesome. You like pheasant on. That's really fun.
Oh yeah, I tried to do it all. I got really after the wood ducks this year, which I was glad because we didn't really get any other ducks that came through.
Right.
And then I was gone for Thanksgiving week, which is when the migration really picked up in Iowa.
Yeah.
So, yeah, all my duck hunting was the first split, just that 1 week, but we piled up a lot of woodies and
Nice.
Cool.
It was fun.
Do you enjoy eating duck?
Oh yeah,
Really?
I do.
Man, I just feel like they just taste like mud. I never feel like I've never had good duck.
I mean, I don't like eating mergansers.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I mostly just shoot puddle ducks and
yeah,
woodies, teal, mallards. Mallards are pretty low on the list for me. I think that they have the strongest flavor, which I still like to eat, but I actually get more excited for the duck fat than anything.
Really?
I render it all down and just use it like oil.
Interesting.
But
Cool.
Yep.
Huh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Huh.
But
When I interned at Midwest Whitetail, one of the interns there, he was from Georgia, so he was a huge duck hunter. And they went in Iowa and they shot a couple teal, and he cooked it up. And I think he had like bacon wrap chunks of the teal or whatever, and it was literally one of the best things I've ever had for like wild game. It was so good.
Oh man.
It was unreal.
yeah, bacon always helps.
Oh yeah, you put bacon on anything, man.
Oh, it was so good.
Yeah,
Duck can be great though. You just have to know how to cook it. I mean, it does have its own flavor. It's a little livery and it's a little irony.
That's the part. It's the livery part.
Yeah.
Kind of that irony taste. That's part I can't.
It's
get
not
over.
a mild meat.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's part I can't get over.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm just kind of spoiled with venison and beef ribeyes.
Yeah. Man, if you throw ducks in like a gumbo or something like that though, it's great. It's great.
I'll tell you what we had earlier this year that I was super excited about. We cooked up a rabbit at our house. Jet caught a rabbit, and we cooked up a rabbit, and that was fun.
Yeah.
Man, that tasted really good.
Oh yeah.
Dude, I breaded it, and then I took like a Dots pretzels and crushed them all up, and we breaded it like little chicken nuggets. Man, it was good.
Nice.
I was like, we're moving to this farm. The first thing, Jed, he's like, so how many rabbits can we shoot? I'm like, well, first, Jetty, you can only hunt them during a season. We were in season, so we were good that way. I'm like, you just can't shoot rabbits all the time. You know what I mean? He's like, what?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's like, there's a season on rabbits. I'm like, yeah, bro. He was like all mad at me. He's like looking at me like, well, who do I have to talk to about that? You know what I mean? But yeah, he's all gung ho, and I'm like, there's only so many rabbits out there, bro. So like, well, let's just leave them alone. And so he's like, so now we're negotiating how many rabbits we're going to be able to kill, so we can keep the rabbits coming back.
Yeah.
That's funny. I mean, hey, just shoot the males, man. Then you don't got to worry about it.
Yeah. No, but yeah, I really enjoyed that rabbit. I thought it was good.
Yeah.
Squirrel's even better.
Well, you know what's funny is growing up, I had a buddy that we used to do a lot of squirrel hunting. His grandpa made squirrel stew. Mm-hmm. He was all about squirrel stew. So I used to eat a lot of squirrel stew, and I really like that. I've never had squirrel any other way besides like a stew. But
I love it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of squirrels around.
Yes.
Holy guacamole.
Yeah,
Golly, where we were done here out there, it's like feels like it's squirrel central.
oh, it's unreal. They're everywhere.
Big fox squirrels.
Yeah,
man,
big
I love
fox
them.
squirrels.
Yeah.
Yep,
they were hard to come by in Wisconsin. I don't know about for
Yeah,
you too,
same
but
thing. Yeah.
gray squirrels, it's like whatever.
Yeah.
I get jacked about hunting fox squirrels just because they're such a novelty to me still.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And they're
Interesting.
dumb. They're dumb and slow and
Oh, yeah.
sit in the tree and look at you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Gray
come
squirrels
down
are
the
hard.
branches.
Yeah.
It's funny, when I was a kid, that's how actually my grandpa would take me squirrel hunting. And the first time he took me squirrel hunting, it was the most crazy thing. He pulled out 2 quarters.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And we sat by a tree, and he literally took the quarters and he rubbed them together. He just sat there, and I'm like a little kid. I'm like Jet's age. I'm like, what are we doing? He goes, and he's like, just watch. And so he sat there, and he had his hand like this on his knee, and he just sat there, and he just, and literally wasn't but 10 minutes, and the squirrels just started coming out of the trees, and they get so curious about it. And that's the way he hunted squirrels. And that's the way I guess his dad taught him. He just took 2, and you wouldn't think they would be able to hear something like that, but I guess they could. And they just came through the trees, and they're like, okay, shoot that one. I'm like, okay. And that's the way he did it.
Huh.
Yeah.
I'll have to try it.
Yeah, seriously, try it. I'll never forget that. It was the craziest thing.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, but the thing about it, back in the day, in the 40s and 50s, they lived and died by squirrels and rabbits.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? That was the thing.
Oh,
that was what they did. I mean, they really, ducks, squirrels, rabbits, that was where it was at.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That's really what they did.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, that's really interesting. Well, that's awesome that you had a great year.
For sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, well, let's wrap it up.
Yep.
Thank you, Jace, for being here. I really, really appreciate it, dude. That's always fun having you.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of info.
Yes.
Man, I am fact out.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Another Ozonics Killerwinds podcast in the book. Thanks again for listening. I'm Cole Tanner.
I'm Nick Simon.
Thanks, Jace, for being here. Really appreciate it, man. Stay classy.
See you next week.
Stay classy.